Our next question is from a listener in Newcastle, Pennsylvania. The listener writes, "It says in 2 Samuel 12 that God sent Nathan to rebuke David for his adultery and murder. In chapter 19, David is reproved by Joab for his lament over the death of his son Absalom. In chapter 24, God speaks of his displeasure with David for registering the people of Israel and Judah. It puzzles me why God didn't then rebuke David at the time he took for himself many wives and concubines. Certainly God was not giving approval of David's actions by his silence. Would you please explain?"
Why, certainly. God had already sent the prophet Nathan in to condemn this thing that David was doing. Now, how many times do you want God to do that? I can't think of it being more emphatic than that. God's not repeating this for the simple reason He's already made it plain to David that it was wrong. And this is the thing that brought the house of David down, as you well know, at that particular time. So that to say that God hadn't taken notice or said anything about it, may I say to you, He'd already said it. He'd already told him that. I never shall forget when I was a boy, my dad was not a Christian. He didn't accept Christ till he was on his deathbed. And I remember that I slept out with several boys on Sunday morning instead of going to Sunday school. He made me go to Sunday school, and I don't know why he did that. I used to argue about it. He made me go, and he didn't go. And so that morning, we all happened to have a fishing line in our pocket, and we went down fishing. And I was doing fine fishing, and all of a sudden I discovered there's somebody standing back of me, and I turned and looked, and there stood my father. And he wasn't looking very happy either. And he told me, he says, "I told you that you were never to go fishing on Sunday. I told you that several years ago." And I wasn't over 10 years old then. He says, "I told you that several years ago." And he helped me to it. How many times did he have to tell me that? Every Sunday morning, "Son, you remember you're not to go fishing today?" No, he didn't. He told me one time, and when my dad said it one time, friends, that was all that was necessary, because he meant it. Now, when God said something to David one time at the very beginning about him taking another man's wife, that was enough. God doesn't have to repeat. My dad didn't have to repeat. And if my dad didn't have to repeat, God doesn't have to repeat. God had already made it clear. And the judgment that came on the house of David certainly makes it very clear that that certainly was not God's method.